Tonight, a major shift in U.S. involvement in the war in Ukraine. President Trump fed up.
So much talk. It's all talk. It's all talk, and then missiles go into Kiev and kill 60 people.
How the changes could turn the tide for the war-battered nation. Plus, thousands of Afghans facing deportation. Among them, Christians fleeing the Taliban. Why faith leaders are calling the decision a matter of life and death. And Texas floods. The search for the missing continues, with more storms sweeping through. How faith groups are working to bring comfort to survivors. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. President Trump with a message for Russia. Negotiate an end to the war in Ukraine in 50 days or be prepared to pay. Good evening in Washington, I'm Jenna Browder. President Trump is threatening the Kremlin with new tariffs and at the same time touting a plan to arm Ukraine, announcing a major new weapons deal paid for by Europe. National security correspondent Caitlin Burke has our top story. Caitlin, does this mean the U.S. will now be sending weapons directly to Ukraine?
Jenna, this deal is about Europe stepping up. President Trump has made clear the U.S. has already spent too much money on the war in Ukraine. So while we will provide the weapons Ukrainian forces desperately need, Europe is going to pay 100% of the cost.
Big deal we've made. This is billions of dollars worth of military equipment is going to be purchased from the United States, going to NATO, etc. And that's going to be quickly distributed to the battlefield.
The president says this goes beyond just sending Patriot missile defense systems. It involves missiles, ammunition, a full battery of weapons. And he claimed the brief pause in weapons shipments earlier this month was so the Pentagon could evaluate the U.S. stockpile ahead of making this deal. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte helped broker the agreement between the U.S. and European nations. And he says many countries are coming forward ready to pay big to arm Ukraine.
This is again Europeans stepping up. So I've been in contact with many countries. I can tell you that at this moment, Germany massively, but also Finland and Denmark and Sweden and Norway, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Canada, they all want to be part of this. And this is only the first wave.
Ukraine will receive much of the weaponry it needs almost instantly, with countries like Germany agreeing to send weapons from their own stockpiles, which will then be backfilled by shipments from the U.S. Trump said he hopes this new deal will help push Moscow towards peace, voicing frustration with the tactics of Russian President Vladimir Putin.
I speak to him a lot about getting this thing done. And I always hang up and say, well, that was a nice phone call. And then missiles are launched into Kiev or some other city. And I said, it's strange. And after that happens 3 or 4 times, you say, the talk doesn't mean anything.
Trump announced he'll be imposing secondary tariffs at 100% on Russia if a deal to end the war isn't reached within 50 days, saying that it's time for talk to become action. Jenna?
All right, Caitlin, thank you. And for more on this, let's bring in senior White House correspondent Kelly Wright and Brad Bowman, senior director of the Center on Military and Political Power at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Gentlemen, welcome. Brad, let's start with you. So how does this turn the tide for Ukraine from a strategic military standpoint?
Thanks for the opportunity to join you, and thanks for the question. You know, U.S. weapons are one of the reasons that Ukraine continues to exist as an independent sovereign nation, along with the bravery of Ukrainians defending their homes against this unprovoked invasion. Our European allies are stepping up on defense spending, building their stockpiles and their ability to help Ukraine. But we have a window here where U.S. weapons are particularly important. And so what this deal represents is European money buying American weapons so that they can be delivered to Ukraine. That's going to give President Trump leverage. That's going to make Russian attacks less successful. It's going to save Ukrainian lives. It's going to bolster the U.S. defense industrial base. And it's going to send an important message to Beijing that America is not neutral when an authoritarian aggressor attacks a beleaguered democracy.
Yeah, and potentially stop what would be an invasion of Taiwan. Kelly, President Trump's tact with Vladimir Putin, he is clearly fed up. He seems to have given up on any good faith conversations. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, basically, as he talked earlier today, and then again in the East Room when he spoke to members of the faith and business leader communities for a White House Faith Office luncheon, I listened to the president and watched him there in the room where he talked about this very deal. And he received thunderous applause, in fact, a standing ovation for the people who were there, who actually were buoying on his strength and his ability to stand up against Vladimir Putin. Look, the president is very exasperated, frustrated with Vladimir Putin. He has been dealing with him over a number of years, at one time admiring him and still saying he's a likable guy. He has great conversations, but at the end of the day, when he finishes a conversation with Vladimir Putin, stating that they're going to get to a peace deal, then his wife, Melania, the First Lady, says, interesting, he just blew up a building with children. So this is where the president's frustration is, and he's taking Vladimir Putin to task.
Yeah. Brad, if you could explain the idea of secondary tariffs, how they work, and why this is so significant.
Yeah, the president used that term secondary tariffs. As I think the White House later clarified, he might have been a little confused in that statement. You have tariffs, which most Americans are increasingly familiar with, and then you have secondary sanctions. And so sanctions come in two forms, primary and secondary. Primary sanctions are when the United States imposed sanctions on Iran or Russia directly on citizens in those countries or entities in those countries. Secondary sanctions are when you target citizens and entities of a third country and say, hey, if you do business with Russia, we're going to sanction you. And the reason that's relevant here is China, for example, purchases a lot of Russian oil. That results in Chinese money going to Russia that Putin uses for his war in Ukraine, where he's killing Ukrainian men, women, and children. So if we can stop the purchase of Russian oil via secondary sanctions, you deprive Putin of the money he's using to engage in the largest war in Europe since World War II.
Yeah, and isolating the Kremlin.
The president Yeah, I was just going to say, adding to that statement, the president also realizes, as well as the White House, they realize if they do this with Putin, with those secondary tariffs, it will basically eviscerate the economy that Russia has enjoyed, but now that economy is already crumbling because of the war. And Mark Rutter talking about the fact that there were 100,000 Russian soldiers who have lost their lives since January.
Just since January, yeah. The death toll continues to climb. It is very, very high in this war. Brad, if I could, how do you think Vladimir Putin is looking at all of this?
I think Vladimir Putin is worried that President Trump's finally got him figured out. You know, students of history know that Vladimir Putin is a former KGB colonel. He's trained in deception. He's a stone-cold murderer and aggressor. And he's going to continue to push his Russian bayonet forward until he hits something hard. And the hard thing, at least since 1949 at the foundation of the North Atlantic Treaty, is American political will and combat power. And so, you know, American support for Ukraine is sustainable. We've spent the equivalent of less than 2.8% on what we spent on the Pentagon over the same time period to simply provide the people of Ukraine a baseball bat over the back fence so they can brutalize Putin, the home invader, so he reconsiders his line of work. We can sustain this forever. Trump is realizing that Vladimir Putin is all talk, and he's going to continue with his war until we shift his cost-benefit analysis. And you do that with tariffs, secondary sanctions, and weapons to the people of Ukraine so they can defend their homes against this unprovoked invasion.
If we could, Kelly, where do things stand there with ceasefire negotiations?
In terms of Israel and Gaza, the president is hoping, as well as Bibi Netanyahu, they're both hoping that they will get to a place of achieving that ceasefire. But there is an impediment that stands in the way, and that's Hamas. Hamas has not agreed to releasing the hostages that are still in captivity. Bibi Netanyahu last week talked about, during his visit here, that he wanted to see all of the hostages released, 20 who are believed to be alive and the other 30 who are still believed to be dead. President Trump wants to start somewhere with an incremental release of 8 to 10 hostages, and getting that done to a 60-day ceasefire. It remains to be seen if Hamas will come to the table and actually comply with that.
Brad, Israeli officials are reportedly floating the idea of military control-led camps in Gaza for displaced Palestinians. In about 30 seconds, your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are that this war continues and it's time to bring it to an end. And the primary reason it continues is because Hamas refuses to release these hostages these many, many months later. And so we have to ensure those hostages come home. And we have to make sure that Hamas can never do again what they did on October 7th, and that they can never govern Gaza again. And I think the best way to achieve that is for the United States and Israel to be unified, to work together to reach those objectives, and to begin to get humanitarian assistance to innocent civilians in Gaza.
Okay, Brad Bowman with FDD and CBN's Kelly Wright. Gentlemen, thank you. Well, members of a small Baptist church in Lexington, Kentucky are grieving the loss of 2 members tonight. A gunman shot and killed a mother and her adult daughter working in the building Sunday afternoon. The shooter also injured a state trooper before leading police on a 15-mile chase that ended at the church.
The suspect fired his weapon at individuals on church property. Preliminary information indicates that the suspect may have had a connection to the individuals at the church. 4 individuals were shot on church property. 2 female victims were pronounced deceased at the scene. The other 2 victims, both male, were transported to a local hospital.
The suspect was ultimately killed by Lexington police. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear posted about the situation on X, saying, "Please pray for everyone affected by these senseless acts of violence," adding, "Let's give thanks for the swift response by the Lexington Police Department and Kentucky State Police." In Central Texas, they are facing the possibility of more storms tonight. This is after a weekend of heavy rain that paused search efforts for people still missing in the deadly July 4th flooding. More than 130 are confirmed dead due to the devastating floodwaters, while around 160 are still unaccounted for. As search and cleanup efforts continue, CBN's Operation Blessing is there, partnering with local churches and volunteers to help those most in need.
We're right here in Kerrville, Texas. As you see right now, we're at the Home Depot parking lot. We have a distribution hub right here distributing food supplies, hygiene supplies, cleaning supplies for the families. They're coming by the day, picking up stuff, and taking it to their homes where they can start cleaning, which is one of the most difficult process right now that they're going to start with. We have volunteers popping up every morning here too, and we are coordinating them going out. Right now we have 2 teams of 42 volunteers, 43, going to different places as far as hunt, like 12 miles from here on the Guadalupe River, start cleaning homes and helping families with the debris and all that.
Yeah, it's amazing work OB does. For more on Operation Blessing and how you can help these communities devastated by this flooding, please visit ob.org. Okay, coming up, the Trump administration ending temporary protected status for thousands of Afghan refugees, what it could mean for Christians from Afghanistan. Welcome back. Today marks the end of temporary protected status for nearly 11,000 Afghan refugees living here in the United States. TPS was granted to some Afghans after the U.S. military withdrawal in 2021. Among them, Christians fleeing persecution. The program offered protection from deportation to people facing danger in their home countries. The Trump administration justified the move by saying conditions have improved in Afghanistan, but human rights groups say the threat of religious persecution under the Taliban remains high. Back in May, more than a dozen prominent Christian leaders sent a letter to President Trump urging him to reconsider. Matthew Sorens joins us now. He is the Vice President of Policy and Advocacy at World Relief. Matthew, welcome. Great to have you with us this evening. So these 11,000 individuals, they're part of the roughly 200,000 Afghans who came to the U.S. after the fall of Kabul in August of 2021. Your reaction to this ending of the temporary protected status here in the United States for these 11,000 Afghans?
Yeah, I mean, it's just really difficult for me to understand the assessment that Afghanistan is now safe to return to. I don't think that anyone looking independently and objectively at the hardship facing particular categories of people in Afghanistan, like Christians or other religious minorities, or those who served alongside the U.S. military and are thus threatened by the Taliban, or frankly, just women and girls who took advantage of the opportunity for education and now have had that opportunity withdrawn. Unfortunately, Afghanistan remains one of the poorest countries in the world and one where persecution is very, very severe, especially for Christians and other religious minorities.
Yeah, the White House says conditions have improved enough for them to return. It points to things like a decrease in threats of terrorism against the Taliban and improving food insecurity. The administration also says that some of these TPS holders pose a threat to U.S. national security. What do you make of that part of it? Saying that some of them might pose a threat to security here.
Well, I mean, these are individuals who, by nature of applying for temporary protected status, went through and passed a criminal background check. If there's any sort of reason to think that any of them presents a credible threat to the United States, of course they should be removed. But these are individuals who've already been verified to not have a criminal background. And I think, we need to have the discretion to be able to distinguish between a persecuted Christian and someone who, has committed acts of crime or even potential terrorism. The reality is withdrawing TPS from everyone means that anyone with that designation, if they can't apply for some other legal protection, which many of them just don't qualify for, sends them back or risks sending them back to very severe danger and even persecution.
Matthew, so back in May, when the White House first announced that it was going to do this, more than a dozen Christian leaders sent a letter to President Trump asking him to reconsider. Matthew, what would you say to President Trump on this issue?
Yeah, I would really appeal to President Trump. I think he's probably getting some bad advice from some folks who are very eager to just eliminate legal immigration possibilities for broad swaths of people who are here lawfully, who entered lawfully. But President Trump himself has actually spoken really affirmatively of legal immigration, and I think that he understands, having been president during the part of the Afghan war, the threats that many categories of people in Afghanistan would face. So I would really appeal to President Trump to have mercy on these Afghans, and frankly on others who came into the country lawfully, who've been here lawfully, who've undergone criminal background checks, and shouldn't be caught up in these sweeps, these immigration raids that are threatening to send people back to very dangerous humanitarian situations.
Yeah. Does World Relief have any footprint in that part of the world, Matthew? And are there any efforts to get into a place like Afghanistan?
We don't have any operations right now in Afghanistan, but we have served a very large number of Afghans here in the United States. Many thousands of Afghans who came in lawfully to the United States after the fall of Kabul, and frankly, even before, people who had served alongside the U.S. military, those who are persecuted religious minorities. And because we're serving them very directly, we're very, very concerned about just the incredible levels of stress. I mean, people are hiding in their homes in the United States because they're afraid of being detained, separated from family, and deported back to what are, from the folks we do know on the ground in Afghanistan, are very, very harsh conditions with very real threats of persecution.
Yeah. All right, Matthew Sorens with World Relief. It's great work that you all do. Thank you for everything that you do there, and take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, up next, artificial intelligence and the church, how emerging technology could bring transformation. AI technology is shaping more aspects of life, including how we worship. And that's raising big theological questions. CBN's Brady Carter investigates how artificial intelligence is transforming churches in America.
One of the questions we actually asked was, do you think that God can work through AI? And we found that a really large number of pastors say that God can work through AI.
The overall embrace of AI in the digital world means it exists where you might least expect.
It's everywhere. It's in social media. It's, when you get on Netflix.
And quietly integrating into nearly every aspect of our lives. Researcher Ashley Ekme of the Barna Group is exploring how U.S. Christians feel about AI and its use in the church.
A lot of congregants aren't particularly trusting of AI in the church at this moment. But pastors in particular are the ones who exhibit the most concern.
Results from the study found 1 in 10 U.S. adults frequently use AI. In the church, more than half of attendees believe AI isn't good for church use, suggesting significant hesitation or skepticism about its role in religious contexts.
There is nothing new under the sun, as Ecclesiastes would say. And God is not surprised by AI.
Brad Hill with Glue, a partner in Barna's study, helps connect people to local churches and sees AI as key to transforming the company's workflow.
We used to have to employ much more manual process to look at an inbound connection request and match it to the right church. So we've taken that now from about 3 hours down to milliseconds.
Glue is investing about $25 million towards implementing AI in the church, including research and development. And Hill says it's time for pastors to also put together a game plan.
It's not just churches and businesses that risk falling behind. Our government is also having trouble keeping pace with this fast-moving technology.
Both policymakers and these organizations are equally responsible for them. They both have to hold themselves to the highest standards.
Dr. Subodh Kumar, a Temple University data scientist, sees the lack of regulation as a combination of Congress needing a better understanding of AI, while also allowing freedom for it to thrive in areas of national security and economic development. In the meantime, it's up to users to regulate and protect themselves, and most importantly, their children.
The parents are oversharing kids' information. And as a user, the best way to protect us right now is that put a control on.
Brody Carter, CBN News.
Thank you, Brody. And still ahead, a heroic team effort helps save the life of a toddler. Finally tonight, a heroic team effort saves a child just moments from disaster. South River police officers were called to a New Jersey home to help a toddler who was choking. When they arrived, the child was already unconscious and quickly losing oxygen. Officers took turns giving the child back blows to help dislodge the object, calling in for backup until finally they succeeded.
I'm so proud of them, and I'm so thankful for everything that they did for my son, because if it wasn't for them, I couldn't be hugging my son today.
And the officers checked in with the medics later to make sure the child was doing okay. The local police chief joining the family and calling them